Hey, I've been getting some comments back from people, and I just wanted to go over a couple of things really quick, some of the most common questions. The auto trend line study will only draw these the most active trend lines. So every time, and I don't have that study active right now, but the solid lines here would be the active trend lines. So this one is going to be down here because it doesn't include the latest candle because if the latest candle breaks through, it'll show you the current trend line until the next candle forms. Then it'll put that trend line down at the bottom of wherever that candle is, but it doesn't know where it's going to go, so it just leaves the old one in. This is where I manually draw in all of these dashed lines because it's way too complicated to make a study that is smart enough to know where these should be, because it doesn't necessarily know that this isn't the one to keep. This is just one that I drew in because this point hadn't been hit yet. So what I'll do is I'll just go in and I'll duplicate the last one and then just move it over to wherever that needs to be, and that's my new historical level. So I'll just keep doing that for each one of these areas where I'll use it as a gauge. So like now that this new one is formed, like the study would draw this one down here at the bottom, and then I would go in and take duplicate the next one up and manually draw it in so I can see where price is going to go. And the important thing to remember with these is that it is both directions. So this is the active trough. So it's the bottom, well, not for long. This is the one that matters for the lower trend lines. You can also draw them from the last active one. So you could draw one from here. Like I think the actual trend line study would draw one here because this line hasn't been broken by price action yet. But you could draw another one, at any one of these points. I just don't like these secondary lines as much because the primary lines are always going to be stronger. And you can see that this is just a lot of lines. There's a lot of things to look at. So I tend not to look at these unless it's a pretty long set. So the thing to notice here is that I'm drawing them from the bottom as well as the top, and you can see that it gets all weird and ripply in here, and that's what you're really looking at is which of the trend line sets is going to be dominant. Here we're in a downtrend, so all of the downtrend ones, so the upper trend lines are the important ones to look at, but these are still important for bounce levels. And you can see that they're crashing down through. So when this starts coming back up again and retesting these, then all of a sudden these ones are going to be more important. But it doesn't mean that they're not important, because you can see obviously price action is trying to come back up through here, and if it had gotten all the way up to this trend line, that's going to be a little bit more bullish, and then you might start looking at this for a reversal. But it didn't even make it close to that, and there's nothing else. I mean, on the 1 minute, this is as fine of a detail as I can get on TOS, and price came down, bounced off of this line, but then didn't follow through and only made it up as far as this. Didn't quite make it to the next trend. Which, I mean, at the time you don't necessarily know, but when it opens here and then doesn't make it above this wick, that could be, you could be in for a short, because now you're looking at this line all of a sudden and thinking, well, it didn't make it to this line. So you have to take into account both the upper lines and the lower lines, and it adds a layer of complexity to it, and you can simplify it by, if you're in a downtrend, just pay attention to the upper trend line. And once you go into an uptrend, then you start paying more attention to the lower trend line. But they both matter. So draw them in manually, and I'll make sure I started linking the auto trend line study. The auto trend line study will just show you where to draw these to make them the most effective trend lines. A lot of people can draw them partway down and still have success. Like they'll draw one from here and say, well, this is my trend line, and you can see it happens to match up with the actual current trend. And the reason that is because it's like a perspective drawing. It all goes back. It's like a 1 point perspective, and in this case it's 2 point perspective, and that's why those work generally. Sometimes they can be flatter, but those are not as strong in my experience as the ones that come from the actual peak, the top peak to the next peak, and then the next peak to the next one down. So we've got this line. So the solid lines here represent what the auto trend line study would actually draw. And at this point, what I'm looking for is for these upper these lines to not get broken through. But if this one gets broken, I'm not going to be too upset. I'm more worried at this point about the lower ones because we haven't invalidated this trough yet. This price level still hasn't gone below. I mean, we've still got a little bit more to go, so this could be a double bottom. And this is why double bottoms form. It's because it's pushing up against the last good trend line, and if you finally get enough buyers in there to overcome the selling power, then it'll work. But once it dips below, buyers are a lot less likely to come in, and now all of a sudden this point is invalidated, which you can just go ahead and delete these lines at that point and then just start drawing them from the new trough. But the upper trend line here is still going to be valid. So all of these are valid until it breaks this line. And actually, it would have to until it breaks the peak. So where this started was really early on today, all the way up here. So these are going to be valid until price gets all the way up here, and then at that point, these ones are invalidated. But until then, these are your strongest ones. I mean, this is really the stuff you want to look at. So when you're seeing them go all the way down here, just remember I'm drawing all of these. There's no study that's going to give these to you. And again, these are not, like, you could almost draw these anywhere. They don't have to be to the peaks, but those tend to be where price is going to get congested more than in other places. And that's how you can tell where you're looking for your, like for here, this would be a decent short entry, even though, I mean, nothing about this trend line suggests that it would drop that violently. So something else happened here. I mean, it's possible that this 23, yeah, I think that was a level today. I think it was 19 or 20 was the level, but it couldn't sustain it, and so it just had a pretty serious drop off of it. But I look at this and I see that, like, it's not making it back above this trend line. It's so close to this one that it's probably just going to dump through. So I'm feeling pretty good about holding my short. I got in short here because at this point it had dropped far enough, but it wasn't making it back up above this line. And that's why I decided to get in short here, and it worked out really well. And I think it'll keep working out really well, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I've got a lot of room to decide whether to get out of this trade. I mean, it could get all the way back up here or further down. I mean, I'll just duplicate this and put it down here, and then you can just sort of decide what your tolerance is for how long you'll let this trade go. But anyway, the important takeaways, TLDR, you have to draw these dash lines in yourself, but you can use the auto trend line study to show where you would draw it. So if this were to break, I would draw this line in manually while it's breaking down, and then make it dashed so that I know that they're broken and ready to be retested. So go get the auto trend line study, see how it draws the trend lines, and then see also how peaks and troughs get invalidated, and then delete those lines out. I'll go in and often just go remove drawings and remove all trend lines. The ones that I want to keep, I'll set up as a channel, even if the channel is only one movement deep, just so that I can delete all of my current trend lines and have my channel, my main one, separate. Some people will do it in a different drawing set. So if you create a drawing set here, you can store your littler ones, the local price action ones on one, and then have your bigger trend ones on another one. But usually for me, it's easier to just go in and delete these manually, and then it'll just clear all of it, which for me it makes it very easy. And then once you have, I can just turn on and off. I turn on and off my studies all the time with a checkbox, which you can do in the settings. If you were to go into the settings, show studies right here, you click this, and this adds it to your drop-down menu. So I have that on my drop-down menu because nobody wants to see all of my chart garbage that I've got all over. Actually, this one isn't that bad, really. But you can see, like, I've got a lot of studies going on, and so visually it can get really confusing. And so when I take screenshots or show people, I like to erase all of my studies off of it because it's embarrassing to have all this dirty laundry out here. But you can see this is the auto trend line study. This is where it's drawing them. There's one off of these two. There's one off of one way up there. And then the next one down was here, and you can see it broke. So if I were going to trace this, I would draw it from where it started down to where it ended. And then I'd go in, right click, edit properties, make it, you can do this however you want. You can change the color, you can do whatever. For me, dash just lets me know that it broke. And then when the minute is up in like 10 seconds here, it'll redraw that trend line up here from here to this point. And then my line, since it's already broken, I know it's broken. I'm using this one as a historical trend line. Once it pops that new line in right there, you can see that my old one is drawn in, ready to go. It just shows you where to draw them. So when you see that break, that's how you know when to go in and draw that line as your next historical trend line. So this price could come down, and if it bounces off of this line, I'd say that's pretty bullish, because even if the price gets lower, if it stays on top on the above side of this line, that's bullish. And if it ever starts deviating away from this line, like this, I mean, this is actually a good example of what it's doing right now. If it turns around before it hits this line, probably it's going to go challenge this next line and not keep going down. So if you're short, that would be a good indicator to get out. I mean, I don't see that happening yet. This is just a little minor bounce here. If this starts challenging and creating lots of new trend lines at that point, I think I might get out. But right now, this is just sort of consolidating at the bottom. There's no reason for me to get out, so I'll stay in. That's the whole point of this, is to give you the confidence to stay in a trade until it actually breaks down. And so for me, in order to get out of this, I think it'd have to come all the way back up to this major trend line here. And at that point, I mean, I'll probably get out before then, but at that point you're looking for this to hold and be another short entry. So look to the bigger lines as the major entries. This would have been killer to get in here and catch all of that. I mean, that's a 20-point move, which is pretty decent. So anyway, that's how you draw in these historical trend lines based on what the auto trend line study gives you.